Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the Board of Trustees, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. Just a few announcements. Michelle wanted me to tell you that the Harry Potter Escape Room will take place on October 7th. The event link is in the upcoming, or see Marianne or Michelle for more information. I hope that many of you will join us for the ministry fair, which I have to say, I'm very sorry about this, but it seems like some of our ministry chairs aren't here. So if they're not, or if you can't get any questions answered, just if there's something you're interested in, just write your name and phone number down on their ministry sheet and say, I have questions, I have ideas, or hopefully you want to join it. But just having ideas and questions will mean a lot to us. Pastor Tom has graciously provided us with a half hour to do this before he starts his session, his after-service session. There's food out there, so join us in the parish hall. Grab your food, bring your questions and your ideas. This will be the last week I will be accepting recipes for the cookbook. What I could really use right now are some soups or chili recipes. So send them to me this week or hand them to me next Sunday. It'll be the last day, and then Caitlin and I will be organizing it and getting it together. And for the ones that have sent them, thank you so much. Monday, September 25th at 6 p.m., Sandy? Yes. It's the Women's Voters?
The Women Voters is hosting it.
Yeah, the Women's Voters Association will be hosting a mayoral debate here in the sanctuary. So, and it's at 6 o'clock. Hopefully I know it's Hobart, and some of you don't live in Hobart, but you worship in Hobart, so maybe you'd be interested in coming. Pardon? When? Monday, September 25th at 6 p.m. Okay. We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming at that time. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you're attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Now please silence your devices and take a deep breath and another, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
Thank you, Jeremy. Now, if you would, join me in lighting the chalice. We gather this hour, people, faith, joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of a life we share together. She's being stubborn again. I think it's part of the wick is part of the problem. Go ahead, honey, I'll wait for you.
Good morning. Would you please join me in reading the opening words? It's in your order of service. We gather on this Sabbath morn to worship in spirit and truth, to raise a joyful noise to the eternal mystery, to reconfirm our covenant, to seek wisdom and love, to strengthen our community commitment, to we come from many paths to explore what is hidden, to consider the ways of our hearts, to confess our that is broken. We assemble in the effort to quicken our compassion and mercy, to deepen our understanding, to renew our courage, to remember who we are. Thus we do celebrate the grace of gift of life and practice our faith to the greater glory of the Spirit. Would you please open your great hymnals to number 155 for Circle Round for Freedom, followed by the affirmation of faith.
Please rise as you are willing and able, and we will sing this one through 3 times together.
Join me in the affirmation of faith. It's printed on in your order of service or on the laminated sheets in your pew or on the screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Okay, now is our time where we greet our neighbors. You could turn around. Do we have a thing? Oh, yeah, we do. I'm sorry. I'm new at this. I'm sorry, I'm new. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making our live stream and recording possible. Thank you, tech team. For those that are present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile fill the spaces between us. Pam. I guess I'm doing the doxology too, I don't know.
Please be seated. So we have an opportunity each week that we come together for a worship service to also share, speak into the space, offer whatever it is that's been on our hearts over the past week or month or year or however long. Each of us steps into this space as an individual with our own physical boundaries, our skin, our clothes that separate us from the rest of the world. And sometimes we need to be reminded, we need to remind ourselves or remind one another about our connections to each other. That we're not having to carry everything by ourselves. And when we have a joy, it might help out to bring it into the space and offer it so that we can all rejoice in it together. Or when we have a sorrow, to similarly bring it into this space so that we can all hold it together. And so I'll walk around with the microphone to invite anybody who would like to share a joy or a sorrow this morning to do so. And when I do, I just invite you to share your name with us so we know who you are. Would anybody like to share a joy or a sorrow this morning? This series is sort of tied in with the previous one about relationship, about recognizing what is real, taking stock of that. And so to kick it off in the spirit of covenant, we've got a few different voices to include in the service. So we've got a couple of readings as well as a story. And so I hope that you'll just drink in these different voices, discussion about covenant and promises and so forth in service of this closing out this experience together.
A covenant invites relationship. A covenant is not a definition of a relationship, it is the framework for our relating. A covenant leaves room for chance and change. It is humble toward evolution. It claims, I will abide with you in this common endeavor, be present as best as I can in our becoming. This calls for a level of trust, courage, and sacrifice that needs to be nurtured, renewed, and affirmed on a regular basis. A creed creates a static truth, something that does not incorporate new insights and realities. A covenant is a dance of co-creation, keeping in step with one another in the flow of our lives. A creed seeks uniformity and a unison voice. A covenant seeks harmony and a shared voice. Sometimes we may arrive at a unison, but it is not required. A creed gives authority to the statement. A covenant gives authority to shared intention. A creed creates an us and them. A covenant invites relationship. A creed is a presentation that must be relied on. A covenant relies on the treasures of shared truth. The overall trust within this covenant is in the truth, capital T, something which no one person can fully see, yet something which each and every person can come to know in glimpses, in another story, in epiphanies. Truth is ever changing in our seeking to understand because of our limited perspectives. We grow into a deeper sense of the meaning of all things when we take our journeys seriously with full heart and mind. The courage within this covenant is in the acceptance and celebration of life, with all of its challenges, pain, ironies, and joys. And the sacrifice within this covenant is in the letting go of dogma, of assumptions, of control, and giving over to a greater wisdom which comes to us in bits and pieces. The task of this covenant is to take responsibility for the freedom we espouse. We know that we are interconnected and that what we do creates ripples of hope or despair, of affirmation or negation. What we do with and for one another is powerful and beyond our imagining.
The story is The Agreement by the environmentalist and author Barry Lopez. One time, before there were any people walking around this valley, there were bear people. They had an agreement with the salmon. The salmon would come upriver every fall, and the bears would acknowledge this and take what they needed. This is the way it was with everything. Everyone lived by certain agreements and courtesies, but the salmon people and the bear people had made no agreement with the river. No one thought it was even necessary. Well, it was. One day, the river pulled itself back into the shore trees and wouldn't let the salmon enter from the ocean. Whenever they would try, the river would pull back and leave the salmon stranded on the beach. There was a long argument, a lot of talk. Finally, the river let the salmon enter. But when the salmon got up into this country where the bears lived, the river began to run in two directions at once. North on one side, south on the other, roaring, heaving white water, and rolling big boulders up on the banks. Then the river was suddenly still. The salmon were afraid to move. The bears were standing behind the trees, looking out. The river said in the middle of all this silence that there had to be an agreement. No one could just do something, whatever they wanted. You couldn't just take someone for granted. So, for several days, they spoke about it. The salmon said who they were and where they came from, and the bears spoke about what they did, what powers they had been given, and the river spoke about its agreement with the rain and the wind and the crayfish and so on. Everybody said what they needed and what they would give away. Then a very odd thing happened. The river said it loved the salmon. No one had ever said anything like this before. No one had taken this chance. It was an honesty that pleased everyone. It made for a very deep agreement among them. Well, they were able to reach an understanding about their obligations to each other, and everyone went their way. This remains unchanged. Time has nothing to do with this. This is not a story. When you feel the river shuddering against your legs, you are feeling the presence of all these agreements. And the second reading is Communities of Memory and Promise. Our communities of memory and promise are founded upon covenants because we all need a defense against the impulse of immediate feelings that challenge our best intentions. It is necessary to be reminded from time to time of what you said you were going to do and what you really want, over and above the lure of momentary comfort. Covenant is our word for the solemn promises that counteract the randomness of a future in which anything and everything is possible, by committing us in advance to certain relationships and values. We do this because what we build with intention, and even with difficulty, is more satisfying in the long run than the pleasures that we happen to encounter. We do it in time-consuming rituals, invoking powers that we scarcely know how to name, because we are seeking some way to give our lives the density and dignity and depth that we suspect, with longing, might yet be possible.
So as I said earlier, this is the last part of this series. 10 weeks ago, we talked about taking stock of what is real and our relationship to what is real, and how much we might want things to be different than they are, and leaning into our love, overcoming our shame, so that we might face the world emboldened and proud. We talked about considering how we might lean into our promises to one another going forward. And a couple of weeks ago, Craig talked about how relationships take some effort to maintain. And last week, Ruth talked about speaking up when something seems off. And today we round out this series by engaging in some forgiveness of ourselves and one another, and engaging in a water communion recovenanting, promising to pour ourselves into these promises that we make to one another. There are sometimes these days articles that people see online in newspapers or other places talking about an epidemic of loneliness in our society. And to some extent, that's about people just being on their own, being in solitary living environments where they don't have much interaction with other people. But it also goes beyond that. For a lot of folks who do have regular interaction with other folks, there isn't really a sense of being truly known or seen. There's a sense of maybe being seen on the surface. Somebody knows your name, they might run into you in particular places, but it not going beyond that. To truly know and see one another is the greatest gift. And beyond that, it is the basis of every good gift. Any really wonderful gift that you've ever gotten is much more about the intention in it, the noticing of it. Like, oh, you thought to get me this thing. You know this about me. That's so wonderful. So let me tell you about one of the worst gifts I ever got. I'd been dating somebody for a little bit. We'd been dating maybe 6 or 7 months or so, and we happened to get together for a holiday, and we were talking about various things, and one of the things that came up in the conversation was about how much I love the movie Point Break. Anybody who's never seen the movie Point Break, it's a wonderful film starring Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze. It's very over the top and silly and enjoyable, but there's a bunch of scenes of them skydiving. There's some incredible skydiving sequences in there, and we were talking about this, and I was talking about, oh, skydiving, wouldn't that be great? I'd love to go skydiving someday. And so lo and behold, for my birthday coming up soon after that, I got a ticket to go skydiving, which is not a cheap thing to get. Skydiving is not an inexpensive thing to happen. But I had my internal response was, yes, I talked about how neat it would be to do this, but am I now committed to going skydiving, this thing that I've never done before and that's kind of terrifying? If I don't end up taking this gift, like, what happens with that? Do I ask it to be returned? It ended up being, instead of this sense of like, oh, this actually speaks to me deeply, it was like, here's this thing that you said one time, go do it. Oh, do I actually want to do that? There was the momentary lure of that conversation that ended up being the hook, as opposed to the larger commitment that might have been possible for us to combine in that relationship. The sense of not being seen, not being known, sometimes can reinforce our own individual addictions. The momentary lure, whether it's the sweet treat that we know we shouldn't have and we kind of don't want to have, or it's the extra time on Facebook that when we really should be going to bed, or the extra 15 minutes on MSNBC to kind of see how they put things. There are so many lures to draw us beyond our actual commitments to ourselves, to one another, to how we want to be showing up in the world. The UU practice of covenant is the polar opposite of all of this. Seeing not just who we are in the moment, not just our surface selves, but our hopes, our dreams, what we yearn to bring into fruition. To covenant with one another is to give the gift of all of that. In this series, our opening words talk about gathering to worship in spirit and truth, seeking wisdom in love, strengthening our commitment to the common good, exploring that which is hidden, considering the ways of our hearts, confessing how we've stumbled, healing what is broken, quickening our compassion and mercy, deepening our understanding, renewing our courage, remembering who we are, celebrating the grace and gift of life, practicing our faith. And the closing words for this series, I've talked about letting peace reside in your heart, letting grace be spread in the world by your caring touch, letting love spill from your mouth whenever you speak, carrying with you the blessings and responsibilities of living in community, and remembering that you are never, ever on this journey alone, and that is a blessing. That not aloneness is such a blessing. It's what makes possible freedom from our temptations or addictions or habits or tendencies. In different religious traditions, there are different means that are used to find and maintain alignment with one another. And within Unitarian Universalism, that has no religious hierarchy beyond the congregation, that means of redirecting our energies back to one thing and one thing only, and that is covenant. A covenant that is created by you, that is lived out by you, that is broken by you, and that is remade by you. There can be a danger in asking these sort of covenantal questions that the words can feel like they're not quite perfect enough or not quite fitting for where we're wanting to go, and we might get tripped over the words themselves. So let me assure you that the words themselves are less important than the commitment to accountability. Each week, beyond just this series and our worship services in this very room, we explicitly call ourselves a people of faith. We light a sign of our quest for truth and meaning. We celebrate the life we share together. We proclaim that love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Each week we declare a covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We pray that songs of hope and faith arise from all that dwell below the skies, and that peace and goodwill be sung throughout every land and every tongue. Promise to carry in our hearts as well the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. This is quite the quest that we're on together. So how's your quest going? How's your quest going? I've been with you all a little more than a year. And so I've had enough time and experience in this congregation to name some of the ways that I have been out of covenant with you all. If you would look in your order of service, on the inside of the back page, it says, First Unitarian Behavioral Covenant. And there's several different parts to it. We're not going to go over the whole thing in detail this morning because there's a fair amount of stuff in there. But there is a piece in there about standing by your word. And specifically says, we promise to actively work, this is the third sentence there, we promise to actively work to build trust and respect in our community by honoring our word. And so I just wanted to name that I could be better at that. There have been plenty of times when I've said, oh yes, I'll get this to you on Wednesday, or yes, I will totally follow up with you by this date, and oh, that sounds really great, I'll work on that. And then I don't follow up to the extent that I should. And so I would like to come back into covenant with you all and recommit to that going forward. And I say that, I offer that because there is a temptation to hide, to go into shame, my own embarrassment of like, oh, I said I would get this to you yesterday and I didn't do that, and there's the grind and the ache and that. But there's also something in sharing it that makes possible the reconnection rather than the disconnection. So that's one aspect of covenant. Confessing how we've stumbled and working to heal what is broken. Noticing when we ourselves have missed the mark and recommitting to covenanting going forward. Another aspect of covenant is pointing out to somebody else, saying to them, I think you missed the mark here. And so in love, I'll reflect back to you all where this congregation has missed the mark. In this congregation's behavioral covenant, it says, we will commit our hearts and minds to building a community of caring, acceptance, and reconciliation, thus creating a safe environment for us all. It has been hard to find those instances of reconciliation. In putting together this series, I talked to a number of people and tried to see, is there anybody who can come up and offer a story of that? Here was a challenge that I had with somebody, and this is the way we worked through it, and this is how we've come out on the other side. It was very hard to find actual instances and stories of that happening. So that's a piece of the covenant that we could do some work on together. And then the third aspect of covenant is revising. Maybe with this extra attention on covenant, you look it over and you think to yourself, well, actually, that doesn't really fit. That's not actually what I feel like we should be covenanting around. Or maybe you look at it and you feel like, that's kind of stuff that we're doing already, or, oh, that seems like it's way too hard. If there's some way that it feels like it doesn't fit, there's the opportunity to revise. And revising it in and of itself is practicing covenant. It's perfect. It's identifying the ways that a covenantal promise doesn't quite fit. It's a clear sign that we're engaging in this practice together. And when we revise it to better fit the real world and situation and relationships in our lives, that in and of itself is our engagement with this quest with each other. Being humble toward evolution. Being present as best as we can in our own becoming, nurturing, renewing, and affirming trust and courage and sacrifice, joining in a dance of co-creation, keeping in step with one another in the flow of our lives, joining in harmony and a shared voice, giving authority to our shared intention, inviting relationship, relying on the treasures of a shared truth, and seeking wisdom in love, and strengthening our commitment to the common good, and exploring that which is hidden, considering the ways of our hearts, deepening our understanding, remembering who we are, and practicing our faith to the greater glory of the Spirit. And in order to do that, to come back again and again to each other, to an acknowledgement of how each of us have missed the mark, and recommitting to our promises to one another, we also need to forgive. To release our grip, the grip that our hearts and our minds have on wrongs done to us or by us. And now one important aspect of forgiveness that I want to make sure I mention is that it is completely voluntary. There's no instance where forgiveness is a required thing. It has to be given and received voluntarily. And so if as we go through our forgiveness practice this morning, you feel like you're not quite at a place of forgiveness, I invite you instead to do two things. One, take note of the fact that you're not quite ready to forgive. And then two, after the worship service, take action to put things into place so that you might soon be ready to forgive. And then after singing our forgiveness this morning, we'll be coming forward to join our waters, to pour our waters together. The water communion is an annual ritual that many Unitarian Universalist congregations have taken part in that has often been about the travels over the summer. That was what it initially was the focus, but it has shifted from that initial symbolism in most congregations to being more about our pouring our energies together. Pouring our gifts, pouring our promises, pouring our intentions into one combined vessel. And then we boil the water to sterilize it and use it in special ceremonial occasions. So if you didn't bring your own water this morning to pour in there, we have some plastic cups there with a little bit of water for you to use symbolically to pour your own energy and attention into it. And so in the light of everything that I've said, I'd like to invite you into just a moment of contemplation around forgiveness. And so whatever would help you enter into that contemplative space, whether closing your eyes or lowering your gaze or whatever that looks like for you, and just consider for yourself how you may have remained silent when a single voice would have made the difference. When your fear may have made you rigid and inaccessible. When you may have struck out in anger without just cause. When your greed may have blinded you to the needs of others. When your selfishness may have set you apart and alone. When you've fallen short of the admonitions of the Spirit. When you've lost sight of our unity. When your acts have fueled the illusion of separateness. When someone else may have remained silent when a single voice would have made a difference, and that you might be still carrying within you. That might be a place of forgiveness. When someone else's fear might have made them rigid and inaccessible. When someone struck out in anger without just cause. When someone's greed might have blinded them to the needs of others. When someone's selfishness set them apart and alone. When someone's fell short of the admonitions of the Spirit. When someone lost sight of our unity. And for any acts of theirs that might have fueled the illusion of separateness. So arising out of that contemplative space, we'll be joining in some song together. There's a litany. It's number 1037 in the Teal hymnal. And so for each of these, there's a spoken part and a sung part. So I invite you to rise in body or spirit. And you'll see as you look at these pages here, we'll do both the singing and the speaking together. And Jeremy will lead us off with the initial sung part. And the sung part stays the same, and just the spoken part changes each time.
The sung part sounds like this. Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again now.
For each time, read it with me, for each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit. For losing sight of our unity. For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness. Please be seated. Thank you so much for joining in that, whether you were joining with your voice, whether you were joining in the energy and the intention of leaning into forgiveness. Tracking your own availability and willingness to forgive is a key part of all of this. And in that spirit, whether you joined your voice in that, whether you were sitting with your own availability for forgiveness, I'm going to invite folks to come up with either the water that you brought with you or to use the water that is here next to this basin to pour into. From this place of having forgiven or leaning into forgiveness, wherever we are, we can still take the next step of re-covenanting with each other, pouring our promises and intentions together to offer of ourselves to truly be seen and known, not just in our momentary impulses or desires, but also our larger hopes and dreams and longings and yearnings for what it is that we want to bring into the world, to bring into existence. To be willing to truly see and know one another, not just what's on the surface, not just the simple tasks, but the depths and riches beneath and beyond that. So I would like to invite you to just come down the center aisle and pour in your water. This combining of waters is a beautiful thing that we as Unitarian Universalists can come back to year after year to revisit as a regular ritual with one another. We talked about a number of aspects of covenant this morning. My invitation to you over this coming week is to just focus on one particular aspect. At which part of our covenants could you most improve? There's our behavioral covenant that's printed in full in the order of service this morning. There's that part of the affirmation of faith that we repeat each week in our worship service. Which section of each of those could you most improve? And to have a conversation with one individual about that, saying, here's the part that I haven't done as great a job as I would like to do. So to notice that, to pick one of those out, and to have that conversation with one other person. That's my invitation over this coming week. Because the trust, the courage, the task of covenant both draw on and feed into the river that flows in our souls, that quietly tells each of us that we are somebody. But that gets so much louder when we reflect it to each other, our deeper selves, these hopes, these dreams, these aspirations, and hold each other up to those hopes, dreams, and aspirations together. And in doing so, we remind each other of what we really want, over and above the temptations of momentary comfort. We counteract a random future by instead committing in advance to certain relationships and values. When we reflect that inner river for one another, we become present to the gifts of our collective promises. We imbue our lives with the peace, the grace, the love, the density, the dignity, the depth that we suspect with the longing parts of ourselves might yet be possible. So may we lean into that going forth together. Blessed be.
Thank you, Pastor. Now is a time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to a charity chosen by the FIA, Faith in Action Ministry, every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to Cal's Angels. And isn't that, it's a cancer charity for children? You want to come up and talk about it? Okay. For those not here with us today, there's an online link for both one-time and regular donations. And if we could have 4 volunteers, please, and then you can come ahead and speak.
Thank you so much to the committee who decided to include Cal's Angels in loose change for social change. It is marked wrong in the order of service. It's not Carl's. We know a Carl, but it's okay. It's Cal's Angels. If I may read to you, one of the moms of my granddaughter who passed away and was helped by Cal's Angels quite a bit, wrote this just a few days ago. Brave, strong, positive, inspiring, kind words. Words we hear and read every day. Yes, Megan was all these things magnified. Though Megan chose to move through life with a smile and nothing is going to stop me attitude, don't think for a moment that she did not have to, made it wrong. Don't think for a moment that she did not have to push through the darkness of cancer every day to do that. Every day there was pain, fear, anxiety, sadness, jealousy, guilt, doom, anger, exhaustion, and nausea. Her physical and emotional stress load was tremendous. Outside of my stepdaughter, Karen, this is EJ speaking, my daughter-in-law, Andy and me. Andy is her twin, and they were 19 and a half years old. Only her medical team got to witness the daily struggle. What I will never be smart enough to understand is how she maintained her positive attitude and strength. Her first battle was hard and stressful, but also carried a lot of hope. The second came with clinical trials, months away from home, family, friend, and Lurie's Children's Hospital. It took from her not the ability just to walk, but to function from her stomach down. The treatment that made her sick just getting in the car to go to the hospital. The third treatment came with a slowly growing realization that were not enough weapons to keep battling forever and not enough time for a cure. The third required my child to make a choice on how and where she wanted to die. She would not let anyone see those things and would not have chosen to post about them, but it is Pediatric Cancer Awareness and this month, and we need to be reminded of how awful this disease is, and it's to fuel the fight for more money, resources, research, and treatments. Cal's Angels is the organization they relied upon, not only for wishes, but for support and to raise money for actual research, because pediatric cancers are the least funded cancers of all of them. And my granddaughter, our granddaughter, Megan, survived 4.5 years of a 2-year sentence. So she did well with their help. And with your help, they'll do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Now please rise if you're willing and able to join us. I'm sorry. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. Now please rise if you're willing and able to join us in singing of the closing hymn, number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul, in the Teal hymnal.
Closing words are from Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel. Let peace reside in your heart. Let grace be spread in the world by your caring touch. Let love spill from your mouth whenever you speak. Move from this space carrying the blessing and responsibilities of living in community with you. And remember, you are never, ever on this journey alone. Amen. Ashanti, blessed be.
If you would, join me in distinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the heart of community, until we are together again. Okay, it's hot.
We'll start our